I returned from my mother's funeral to a voicemail from her lawyer. He said it was urgent, regarding a safety deposit box I knew nothing about. The key arrived by courier the next morning. What I found inside wasn't her will. It was a ledger documenting every dollar my family had stolen from her for a decade. My mother was the kindest person I knew. For years, my brother and sister told me they were managing her care, her finances, everything. I trusted them. But this ledger, page after page in her shaky handwriting, wasn't just a record. It was an indictment. And the final entry was a single, chilling sentence. If you're reading this, they've already taken everything. Now it's your turn. I sat on my kitchen floor until 3 a.m. turning those brittle pages. The entries went back 7 years. Small amounts at first, 200 for groceries, 500 for medication. Then the numbers ballooned. 5,000 for a roof repair that never happened. 10,000 for a specialist whose name I couldn't find. The last withdrawal, dated 2 weeks before she died, was for $50,000. Destination: an account in my brother Mark's name. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't a mistake. The handwriting was meticulous, each entry noting the date, the amount, the stated reason, and which of them, Mark or my sister, Lisa, had authorized it. In the margins, in fainter pencil, were her notes. Asked for receipts, none given. Said I was confused. Told me not to worry my pretty head. I called the lawyer, Harold Maddox, first thing in the morning. His voice was calm, weathered. He'd been my mother's attorney for 20 years. I read him the final entry. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "I need to see that book, and you need to not speak a word of this to anyone in your family. Do you understand?" I met him in his office, a room that smelled of old paper and wood polish. He placed the ledger on his desk like it was a piece of evidence in a crime scene, which I was starting to understand it was. He flipped through it slowly, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Ella was always sharp," he said, almost to himself. "She came to me 3 years ago, said she was worried about her memory, wanted to put safeguards in place. We updated her will, her power of attorney. She insisted on nomming you as a secondary agent behind Mark and Lisa. I thought it was odd, but she was adamant. She said, just in case they get any ideas." My blood went cold. Power of attorney. That was the legal tool that let them act on her behalf. Did she sign over control of her accounts? "Not to me," Maddox said. "But if she did it privately with them at her bank, then yes. They would have had full legal access. This ledger, it's a roadmap, but it's not proof in a court. It's her word against theirs, and she's not here to give it." He explained the grim reality. Proving financial elder abuse after death is brutally difficult. You need a paper trail, witnesses, patterns a judge can't ignore. A handwritten diary, while powerful, is often dismissed as the ramblings of a confused old woman, especially if her children claim it was for her own good. "The burden of proof is on you," Maddox said, "and they will have covered their tracks." I left his office with a mission and a sinking feeling. The first step was to see her house. Mark and Lisa had been sorting through her things since the funeral. I drove over, my heart a drum in my chest. The house felt different now, hollowed out. Mark answered the door, his expression shifting from surprise to a guarded smile. "Hey, didn't expect you." "Just wanted to see the place," I said, my voice strangely calm. Inside, boxes were everywhere. Lisa was in the dining room, wrapping china in newspaper. "We're just getting a head start on the hard stuff," she said, not meeting my eyes. I walked through the room, seeing it all anew. The roof repair. The ceiling in the sunroom had an old, water-stained patch, but it was at least 10 years old. The new furnace they'd claimed she needed last winter. The unit in the basement was dated 1998. I wandered into her small study. The desk was cleared, the filing cabinet empty. "We already did the paperwork," Mark said, appearing in the doorway. "Bills, taxes, it's a mess. Better we handle it." But my mother was a retired bookkeeper. Her whole life was order. I mumbled an excuse and left, but not before I saw it. Taped under the lip of her favorite reading chair, a single, flat key. I palmed it as I said goodbye. That key opened a small, fireproof lockbox I found tucked behind the water heater in the basement, a place only she and I knew about from when I'd helped fix a leak. Inside wasn't money. It was a second layer of her defense. Neat bundles of bank statements going back 5 years with certain withdrawals highlighted in yellow. Copies of emails she'd printed out. "Mom, just sign the form, it's easier this way. The bank needs your signature for the new investment account." And then the jackpot, a cheap, thumb-sized voice recorder. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed play. There was the soft rustle of the room, then my mother's voice, frail but clear. "Mark, I don't understand this transfer. This is my certificate of deposit." Mark's voice, impatient, clipped. "It's maturing. We're moving it to a better account for your care. You need to trust me." "But it's $50,000. I wanted to leave that for the grandchildren." "And you will. It's just growing. Now sign before the bank closes." The sound of a pen scratching. Then my mother's voice, so quiet it was almost a whisper, recorded maybe for herself alone. "He's lying." I had it, a direct piece of evidence, a time-stamped conversation. But as I sat there in the dusty basement light, a new, more terrifying realization dawned. This wasn't just theft. The ledger entries showed a pattern of isolation. Payments to a companion service that never visited. Cancellations of her longtime housekeeper. Overdraft fees from when they'd moved her pension to an account they controlled and forgot to pay her bills. They weren't just stealing her money. They were systematically erasing her support network, making her entirely dependent on them. This was premeditated. This was a long-term strategy. I went back to Maddox with the lockbox contents. This time his eyes held a sharp, grim light. "This changes the game," he said, "but it's still not enough for criminal charges. This is a civil fight, a brutal, ugly war over the estate, and they will fight dirty." He laid out the battlefield. The will left the estate equally to the three of us. But if a significant portion of her assets had been stolen before her death, that was not part of the estate. I could sue them personally for what they'd taken. It would mean suing my own brother and sister. "There's another way," Maddox said slowly. "The power of attorney. If we can prove they abused that fiduciary duty, the court can force them to repay the estate personally. It's faster and it carries the stain of a judicial finding. But to do that, we need incontrovertible proof of their intent. We need to show they conspired to drain her assets." He suggested a forensic accountant, someone to trace every highlighted withdrawal to follow the money to its final destination. It would be expensive. It would take months. And the entire time, Mark and Lisa would be living in her house, liquidating her possessions, acting like grieving, dutiful children. I authorized it. I used what was left of my own savings to hire the accountant. For weeks, I lived in a suspended state of rage and grief. I avoided family calls. I played the grieving son when I had to. At a family dinner, Mark casually mentioned they were thinking of selling the house soon. "Mark, it's hot. Split 3 ways, it's a nice chunk for each of us." I just nodded, tasting ash. He was already counting his share of the spoils, on top of what he'd already stolen. Then the forensic accountant's report landed in my inbox. It was a masterpiece of devastation. He traced over $300,000. It didn't go to roof repairs or medical bills. It flowed into a joint investment account owned by Mark and Lisa. It paid off the mortgage on Lisa's vacation home. It funded Mark's new car. And there, on page 47, was the kill shot. A series of emails recovered from my mother's internet server between Mark and Lisa. They thought they'd deleted them. The accountant pulled them from the cloud backup she'd unknowingly maintained. The subject line of the last one read, "Final transfer plan." Lisa wrote, "Once we move the CD, that's it. The well is dry, we just have to keep her calm until the end. Doctor says it won't be long." Mark replied, "Then we sell the house, split everything 3 ways with the idiot and walk away clean. He'll never know a thing." I printed that email. I held it in my hands, the paper cold as a knife. The idiot. That was me. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't just greed, it was contempt. They'd viewed our mother as a well to be drained and me as a fool to be paid off with my own inheritance. I drove to Maddox's office, the email in my bag. I had the ledger, the recordings, the financial autopsy. I had the proof of conspiracy. I was ready to burn my family to the ground. Maddox read the email, his face unreadable. Then he looked up. This is what we needed. We can file a motion tomorrow to freeze the estate assets and sue them for fiduciary abuse. But you need to be ready. Once we file, there is no going back. It will be a public court record. It will tear your family apart forever. I didn't hesitate. Do it. He nodded, a soldier accepting orders. Then there's one thing we should do first. A strategic move. We have to secure the one asset they think they already control, the one they're living in and planning to sell. He slid a document across the desk. It was a petition for a temporary restraining order to prevent the waste or alienation of estate property. In plain English, to stop Mark and Lisa from selling my mother's house. We'll have a process server deliver it to them at the house tomorrow, Maddox said. They won't see it coming. The plan was set. The war began at dawn. I went home, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, imagining the scene, their confusion turning to shock, then to panic. The careful facade of the grieving, cooperative siblings shattering in an instant. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have planned for, was that Mark and Lisa weren't just passive thieves. They were prepared for a fight, and their first counterattack wouldn't be a legal document. It would be a phone call that would threaten to destroy the one thing I had left, my reputation and my sanity. The call came at 8 a.m. the next morning, not from a process server, but from a Detective Miller with the county sheriff's office. His voice was flat, professional. We need you to come in for a conversation. It's regarding allegations of undue influence on your mother, Ella Brooks, in the months preceding her death. My stomach dropped. They had struck first, and they had gone straight to the police. I called Maddox, my voice tight with panic. He listened, then cursed softly. It's a preemptive strike. They're trying to muddy the waters, put you on the defensive. If the police open an investigation, even a baseless one, it delays our civil case and makes you look guilty. It's a classic tactic. What do I do? You go, you say nothing without me present. I'll meet you there. The interview room was cold. Detective Miller was a large man with tired eyes. He slid a file across the table. We received a detailed statement from your siblings, Mark and Lisa Brooks. They allege that in the last 6 months of your mother's life, you became increasingly coercive, that you pressured her to change her will, to liquidate assets for your benefit. They claim they have witnesses who saw you arguing with her about money. It was a breathtaking inversion. Every crime they had committed, they were now accusing me of. Maddox placed a hand on the table. Detective, my client has filed no will contest. He is, in fact, the beneficiary of a substantial estate under the existing will. Where is the motive for undue influence? The siblings claim the existing will was recently altered under duress, Miller said, glancing at me. They say they have a prior version that leaves them a larger share. They're alleging fraud. My blood ran cold. A prior version. That was impossible. Maddox had drafted the last will 3 years ago, but if they had forged an older document, the ground was shifting under my feet. Maddox remained calm. We would welcome a review of any alleged prior will. In the meantime, my client has compiled extensive evidence of financial exploitation of Ella Brooks by Mark and Lisa Brooks. We were preparing to file it with the probate court today. We believe this police report is a retaliatory smokescreen. He handed Miller a slim folder, a summary of the forensic report and a transcript of the recorded conversation. This is a civil matter rapidly turning malicious. We have the evidence. They have, thus far, only allegations. Miller took the folder, his expression unreadable. I'll look at it, but this interview is over. Don't leave town. Outside, the sunlight felt accusatory. Maddox's jaw was set. They're more sophisticated than I gave them credit for. A police report creates a public record. It can scare off witnesses. It gives them ammunition to tell the rest of the family you're being investigated for abusing your mother. They're trying to isolate you socially and legally." He was right. By that evening, my phone started buzzing. A cousin, texted by Lisa, "Heard there's some trouble with the estate. Hope you're okay." An aunt left a vague, worried voicemail. The narrative was being seeded. I was the problem. But the restraining order on the house had been served. Maddox got the confirmation while we were in his car. They're locked out of selling it, but they're still living there. That's our next move, an emergency petition to have them removed as executors and occupants. We use their police report against them, argue their conflict of interest is now a matter of criminal allegation. The following week was a blur of legal paperwork and silent dread. The probate court moved with glacial speed. Our petition was set for a hearing. Mark and Lisa, now represented by a slick, aggressive lawyer named Carson, filed a counter-petition to have me removed as a beneficiary, citing the ongoing police investigation. The battle lines were drawn in public court documents. The local legal newspaper ran a small blurb. Sibling rivalry erupts in Brooks' estate dispute. My private war was now a public spectacle. Then the second blow landed. A woman from Child Protective Services showed up at my office. My wife, Sarah, called me, her voice shaking. "They're here. They're asking about our home environment, about our arguments, about whether we're fit parents." Mark and Lisa had weaponized the fact that we had a 3-year-old daughter. They implied my unstable behavior and legal troubles created an unsafe home. I drove home, a cold fury replacing my fear. This was no longer about money. They were coming for my daughter. When I arrived, the CPS worker was polite but firm. She asked about the police investigation. She asked if Sarah and I were under stress. She asked if we had ever left our daughter in the care of my mother during her period of decline. It was a trap. Any answer could be twisted. After she left, Sarah collapsed into a chair, crying, "What is happening? Your family is trying to destroy us." I had no answer, only a resolve harder than steel. I called Maddox again. "They brought my child into this." His voice was grave. "It's a nuclear option. It means they're desperate. They know the financial evidence is solid, so they're attacking your character from every angle. We need to change tactics. We go on the offensive, not just in probate court. We take their evidence public." He proposed a daring, risky move. We would file a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and defamation, separate from the probate case. We would sue them personally for the CPS report, for the false police allegations. And we would include as an exhibit the most damning piece of evidence, the email where Mark called me the idiot. "It's a gamble," Maddox said. "It escalates the conflict exponentially, but it also forces their hand. They'll have to answer these allegations under oath in a public courtroom much sooner than the probate case would require. We call their bluff." I told him to do it. The lawsuit was filed the next day. The local news, always hungry for a salacious family feud, picked it up. Sun Tzu's siblings, claims elder theft and smear campaign. Reporters called. Carson, Mark and Lisa's lawyer, gave a fiery statement calling me a greedy, vengeful son trying to profit from his mother's death. The noise was deafening, but within the chaos a strange thing happened. A witness emerged. An old friend of my mother, Martha, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, called me. Her voice was hesitant. "I saw the article. I need to tell you something. Your mother called me often, especially in the last year. She was scared, not of dying, of your brother and sister." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What did she say, Martha?" "She said they were taking her money, that they'd taken her checkbook, her credit cards. She said they told her she was a burden, that her memory was going. But she was sharp as a tack with me. She said she was documenting everything, that she'd left a key for you. She made me promise not to tell anyone until after she was gone. She was afraid they'd take it from her if they knew." A third-party witness, someone with no stake in the estate. It was a gift from beyond the grave. I asked if she would be willing to give a statement to my lawyer. She agreed. Maddox was ecstatic. This is it. This corroborates her state of mind. It supports the ledger. It destroys their claim that she was confused or that you planted these ideas after her death. But as we prepared Martha's affidavit, Carson launched his own surprise. He filed a motion to compel a psychiatric evaluation of me. He argued that my fixation on the ledger and my aggressive litigation strategy were evidence of paranoid delusion, potentially triggered by grief. The court, shockingly, granted it. I was ordered to see a court-appointed psychologist. The humiliation was absolute. My siblings were not just trying to win. They were trying to have me declared mentally unfit, to have a guardian appointed to handle my share of the estate, which, of course, they would volunteer to control. The evaluation was a surreal, grueling experience. I sat in a bland office while a gentle-voiced doctor asked me about my childhood, my relationship with my mother, my interpretation of the ledger. I fought the urge to scream. I presented the evidence calmly, like a patient explaining a rational fear to someone who thinks they're crazy. As I left the evaluation, feeling stripped bare, my phone rang. It was the forensic accountant. "I found something else," he said, his tone urgent. "Something we missed. The joint account Mark and Lisa used, it wasn't the final destination. They were funneling money through it into another entity, a limited liability company registered in Delaware. The company owns a single asset, a vacant plot of land in another county." I frowned. What does that mean? It means they weren't just spending the money. They were hiding it, converting liquid cash into hard, difficult-to-trace assets. That plot of land is worth about $200,000. It was purchased with 12 separate transfers from your mother's accounts over 2 years. They weren't just thieves. They were money launderers. They had created a whole corporate structure to hide their theft. This was premeditation on a whole new level. This was evidence of fraud that could have criminal implications beyond civil court. I took this new information to Maddox. He stared at the corporate documents, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This is the pivot. This changes everything. We don't just have abuse of power of attorney. We have a pattern of wire fraud, of concealment. We can take this to the district attorney's office. We can force the police to investigate them for real crimes." It was a dangerous gambit. Going to the DA would enrage my siblings and their lawyer. It would make a settlement impossible. It was a point of no return. But they had brought CPS to my door. They had tried to have me declared insane. There was no going back. Maddox drafted a devastating package. The forensic report tracing the money to the LLC, the corporate filings, the ledger, Martha's statement, and a cover letter outlining a systematic conspiracy to defraud an elderly woman. We hand-delivered it to the white-collar crime division of the district attorney's office. For 2 weeks there was only silence. The legal wrangling in probate court continued, a slow, expensive grind. The psychiatric report came back, declaring me perfectly competent, much to Carson's visible frustration. But the real sword was still hanging. Then on a Tuesday morning, I got a call from Detective Miller again. This time, his tone was different, not suspicious, but formal. "We've reviewed the materials from your attorney. We've opened an investigation into Mark and Lisa Brooks for possible felony financial exploitation of an elder and wire fraud. We need to speak with them. I thought you should know." Justice, cold and slow, was finally turning its gaze in the right direction. I called Maddox. "It's happening." "Good," he said. "Now we wait for the fallout, and we prepare for the hearing next week, the one to remove them from the house. With a criminal investigation hanging over them, the judge won't let them stay in the estate's primary asset. We're about to take the first tangible thing back." I allowed myself a sliver of hope. We were winning on paper, but I underestimated how cornered animals fight. I didn't know that Mark and Lisa, facing the ruin of their reputations and potential prison time, had one last, vicious play left. They weren't going to attack me through the courts or the police this time. They were going to attack me where I lived, and they were going to use the one person I had left to trust to do it. The attack came through Sarah. She came home from a grocery trip, her face pale, hands empty. She'd been approached in the parking lot by a woman who introduced herself as a family advocate working with Mark and Lisa. The woman had shown her photos of me meeting with Maddox, of me visiting the forensic accountant's office. "Do you know your husband is planning to bankrupt your family?" the woman had asked. "Do you know he's using your daughter's college fund to pay for this witch hunt?" Sarah was trembling. She said if this lawsuit continues, they'll countersue for everything we have, that they'll drag us through court for years until we lose the house. She said they have statements from Mom's doctors suggesting you were manipulative, that you could lose custody if you're seen as unstable. They had weaponized my wife's greatest fear, the loss of our home, the security of our child. It was psychological warfare designed to fracture my last stronghold of support. I held Sarah, feeling her shake, and the cold fury inside me solidified into something calm and lethal. They had made a fatal mistake. They had threatened my child. Again. I called Maddox. They're harassing my wife, intimidating her with lies about custody. His response was immediate. "That's witness intimidation, possibly stalking. We file a police report. Today. We get a restraining order against them and anyone acting on their behalf. We make this part of the public record for the probate judge to see." We did. The police took Sarah's statement. The family advocate was a private investigator Carson had hired. The restraining order was granted, a thin piece of paper that felt like a shield, but the damage was done. Sarah was terrified, begging me to consider settling to make it stop. For the first time, I felt the war on two fronts, the legal battlefield and my own home. The hearing to remove them from my mother's house arrived. The courtroom was tense. Mark and Lisa sat with Carson, looking drawn but defiant. Our judge, an older woman with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, reviewed the files. Maddox presented our case, the restraining order on the house, the new restraining order for harassment, the opened police investigation into them, and Martha's affidavit about my mother's fear. Carson stood up, oozing confidence. "Your Honor, my clients are the duly appointed executors. They have been caring for the property. This is a transparent attempt by the petitioner to seize control of the estate ahead of schedule. The police investigation is a baseless retaliation, and this witness is a lonely old friend susceptible to suggestion." Then he dropped his bomb. "Furthermore, we have discovered evidence that the so-called ledger at the heart of Mr. Brooks's claims is a forgery." The heir left the room. A forgery. He presented a report from a handwriting analyst they'd hired. The analyst claimed the entries in the ledger showed signs of artificial aging, and that the pen pressure was inconsistent with someone of Ella Brooks's age and purported physical decline. It was junk science, but it sounded impressive in court. Maddox was ready. He submitted our own report from a certified forensic document examiner hired by our forensic accountant. Her conclusion: the ink, the paper, the flow of the handwriting were all consistent with genuine, contemporaneous entries over several years. More importantly, Maddox had a question. "Mr. Carson, if the ledger is a forgery, can you explain how your client's fingerprints were found on pages corresponding to entries that incriminate them?" The forensic examiner lifted several partial prints. It was a bluff, a brilliant, risky bluff. We hadn't fingerprint tested the ledger, but Carson's face flickered for a fraction of a second, pure, unguarded panic. He hadn't expected us to fight fire with fire. He stammered, objecting on grounds of relevance. The judge watched this exchange, her eyes sharp. She didn't rule on the spot about the fingerprints, but the seed of doubt in Carson's narrative was planted. She granted our petition. Mark and Lisa were ordered to vacate the house within 72 hours and were temporarily suspended as executors. A neutral third-party administrator was appointed to control the estate assets. It was our first decisive victory. We had taken the house back. As the order was read, Lisa began to cry silent, angry tears. Mark stared straight ahead, his jaw a hard line. They had lost their command center. But outside the courtroom, Carson approached Maddox, his smugness replaced by a cold, deal-making tone. "This is getting expensive for everyone. My clients are willing to discuss a settlement, a lump sum payment to your client in exchange for dropping all claims in the lawsuit." They were offering a bribe, a payout to go away and let them keep the bulk of what they'd stolen. Maddox relayed the offer to me. "It's a trap," he said. "If you take it, you legitimize their theft. You admit the fight was only about money, and you leave the door open for them to spin the story that you were extorting them all along." I didn't hesitate. No settlement, not a penny. I want a judgment. I want a judge to say in a court of law that they are thieves. Maddox nodded, a glint of pride in his eyes. "Then we prepare for trial." With them out of the house, I was able to enter it properly for the first time. It felt like a crime scene. I walked through the empty rooms, now stripped of many of her personal effects. In her bedroom, I found what they'd missed. The baseboard near her nightstand was slightly loose. Behind it, wrapped in a plastic bag, was another small notebook. This one wasn't about money. It was a log of their visits or lack thereof. Mark came for 10 minutes, took the checkbook, didn't ask how I was. Lisa called, asked for password to investment account, said it was for my taxes. I said no. She hung up. And then the final, heartbreaking entry. "I am so lonely. They have taken my money, my things, my dignity. All I have left is my mind, and they are trying to take that too by telling everyone it's gone. But I remember everything." This was the emotional core of the abuse, the intentional isolation. This notebook, combined with Martha's testimony, painted a picture of calculated cruelty. It was no longer just a financial crime. It was a profound personal betrayal. I gave the notebook to Maddox. "This is for the emotional distress lawsuit," I said. "This is what they really did." As the trial date neared, the pressure from the district attorney's office increased. Mark and Lisa were subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury. Their lawyer, Carson, fought it but lost. They were forced to sit in a room and answer questions under oath about the LLC, the land, the transfers. This is when the second shocking pivot happened. The forensic accountant, digging deeper into the LLC's records, found a third signatory on the bank account. A name that made my world tilt on its axis: Harold Maddox. My lawyer, my mother's lawyer. His name was on the incorporation documents as the registered agent, a legal formality, but it was there. A $5,000 payment from the LLC was made to a HM Consulting 6 months before my mother died. I confronted him in his office, the printout on his desk. His face, usually so composed, went ashen. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice low. "They came to me. After your mother first expressed concerns to me years ago, they came asking for estate planning advice. I set up the LLC for them as part of a legitimate investment strategy. I didn't know they were funding it with her assets. The consulting fee was for that initial setup. When I realized later what they were doing, I severed all ties. But by then, the paperwork was filed. I should have told you. I thought it would undermine your confidence in me." I felt nauseous. My trusted guide had a hidden connection to the enemy. Had he been playing both sides? Was his aggressive strategy a way to cover his own tracks? The foundation of my entire fight cracked beneath me. "Get out," I said, my voice quiet. "You're fired." He didn't argue. He simply stood, a defeated man, and left me alone in his office with a mountain of evidence and no one to interpret it. I was adrift. The trial was in 6 weeks. I had no lawyer. My evidence was now potentially tainted by my own attorney's conflict of interest. In desperation, I called the one person I thought could help, the forensic accountant. He recommended a lawyer, a litigator named Amanda Pierce who specialized in probate fraud and was known for being utterly ruthless. She had no connection to my family, to Maddox, or to the old legal community. She was an outsider. I met Amanda in a sleek, modern office. She listened to the whole story for 2 hours without interruption, her eyes missing nothing. When I finished, she leaned forward. Maddox's involvement is a problem, but it's also an opportunity. It means they had professional help hiding the money. That elevates the scheme. We disclose it immediately to the court and to the DA, full transparency. We turn his failure into evidence of their sophistication. As for your case, I'll take it. But my strategy is different. We're not just suing them. We're going to dismantle their lives. And we start by deposing your brother and sister next week, under oath with me asking the questions. Her confidence was a lifeline. Amanda moved with terrifying speed. She filed a notice with the court about Maddox's conflict. She scheduled the depositions. And she made a phone call to the district attorney, sharing the Maddox information and suggesting a charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. The day of Mark's deposition arrived. He sat across from Amanda in a conference room with his lawyer Carson present. Amanda began politely, then slowly, methodically, she began to box him in. She presented bank statements. She asked him to explain each transfer. He gave vague answers about mother's expenses and investment advice. Then Amanda played the audio recording from the lockbox. His own voice pressuring our mother to sign. Mark's face drained of color. Carson objected, but the deposition continued. Amanda saved her kill shot for last. She slid the email across the table, the one where he called me the idiot and discussed walking away clean. "Is this your email address, Mark?" He stared at it silent. "Read the highlighted portion aloud, please." He refused. Amanda read it for him, her voice cold and clear in the quiet room. "Then we sell the house, split everything 3 ways with the idiot and walk away clean. He'll never know a thing. Does that summarize your attitude toward your brother and your mother's estate?" Mark broke. He slammed his hand on the table. "This is bullshit. She was our mother too. We took care of her. He did nothing." "You took care of her," Amanda repeated softly. "By transferring $300,000 of her money into an LLC you controlled. By isolating her from friends. By calling her son an idiot in a plan to defraud him." She let the silence hang. "The grand jury is going to love this transcript, Mark." The deposition ended with Mark storming out. Lisa's, scheduled for the next day, was canceled. Carson called Amanda, offering a new settlement. This time, the number was much higher, almost the full amount we claimed they'd taken. Amanda told me about the offer in my kitchen. "They're scared. The criminal investigation is real. The deposition was a disaster for them. They want this to go away. This is life-changing money." I looked at Sarah, who was listening quietly. I looked at the picture of my daughter on the fridge. Then I thought of my mother's final notebook entry. "All I have left is my mind, and they are trying to take that too." "No," I said. "The offer is admission of guilt, but it's not justice. I don't want their money. I want the court to give me back what was hers, and I want the world to know what they did." Amanda smiled, a sharp, approving smile. "Then we go to trial and we don't just win, we erase them." The following week, the district attorney's office made its move. Mark and Lisa Brooks were arrested and charged with multiple counts of felony financial exploitation of an elder, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Their perp walks were on the local evening news. The family war was over. The criminal trial was about to begin, and I was no longer a plaintiff in a civil suit. I was the star witness for the prosecution. The game had changed entirely. The verdict wouldn't just be about money, it would be about freedom. The criminal trial was a cold, procedural machine. I sat in the witness box, facing my brother and sister. They looked smaller in their court clothes, stripped of the confidence that had once let them casually plot in emails. The prosecutor asked me to identify the ledger. I held it up, the book that started it all, and told the jury how I found it. I walked them through the entries, the small lies that grew into massive thefts. I identified the audio recording, my mother's frail voice, my brother's impatient demand. When the prosecutor played it in the silent courtroom, you could feel the jury stiffen. I explained the lockbox, the hidden key, the second notebook detailing her loneliness. I was not an angry brother on the stand. I was a translator, explaining my mother's own meticulous testimony from beyond the grave. Their defense attorney, a new lawyer hired after Carson quit, tried to attack. He suggested I was vengeful, that I had planted evidence, that I was motivated by greed because the will left us equal shares. But the evidence was a mountain he couldn't move. The forensic accountant testified, tracing the money through the LLC to the plot of land. Martha testified, her voice quivering but firm, about my mother's phone calls. The prosecutor even called Harold Maddox, whose testimony about setting up the LLC and then cutting ties only cemented the picture of a sophisticated, professionally assisted fraud. The most damning moment came when the prosecutor presented their own financial records. Subpoenaed from their banks, they showed deposits that matched my mother's withdrawals to the dollar. They showed the down payment on Lisa's vacation home, the car loan payoff for Mark. The defense had no explanation. They tried to claim it was all gifts, that our mother was generous and forgetful. But then the prosecutor asked a simple, devastating question. If Ella Brooks was so generous, why did she keep a secret ledger documenting it as theft? Why did she hide a voice recorder? Why did she tell her friend she was afraid? There was no answer. The jury deliberated for less than a day, guilty on all counts for both of them. The verdict was read and Lisa sobbed openly. Mark just stared straight ahead, his face a mask of disbelief. They were handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. Felons. Sentencing was a month later. The judge called their actions a profound, predatory betrayal. She cited the systematic isolation, the abuse of trust, the sheer scale of the theft. Mark was sentenced to 5 to 7 years in state prison. Lisa, deemed slightly less culpable as a follower, received 3 to 5. They were ordered to pay full restitution to the estate, every dollar with interest. The civil case, now a formality, was settled immediately. A judge ordered the immediate return of all misappropriated assets. The plot of land was sold. The vacation home had a lien placed against it. Their personal accounts were frozen. The estate, now whole again, was to be distributed according to the will, 1/3 to me, 1/3 to Mark's trust, now controlled by a court-appointed guardian due to his incarceration, 1/3 to Lisa's trust under the same conditions. I had won. I had taken everything back, but the victory was hollowed out by loss. My family was shattered. Our name was in the newspaper for all the wrong reasons. My daughter would grow up knowing her uncle and aunt were in prison for stealing from her grandmother. I sold my mother's house. I couldn't bear to live in it, every room a museum of betrayal. With my share of the estate, I paid off my mortgage, secured my daughter's college fund, and put the rest away. I didn't buy a flashy car or take a lavish vacation. The money felt tainted, a bitter prize from a war I never wanted. Sarah and I went to counseling. The stress had nearly broken us. We slowly rebuilt, focusing on the quiet, honest life we were trying to protect all along. The restraining orders remained in place. I changed my phone number. I closed the door on that chapter, or tried to. A year after the sentencing, I received a formal letter from the State Bar Association. Harold Maddox had been disbarred. His conflict of interest, his failure to disclose his role in the LLC, and his subsequent abandonment of my case had violated multiple ethical rules. He was finished as a lawyer. It was a small, cold comfort. I thought that was the end of it. The final page of my mother's story had been written by a judge's gavel, but I was wrong. On the anniversary of her death, I was going through the last of the boxes from her house. I found her old recipe box, something the movers had packed by mistake. As I flipped through the cards in her handwriting, a small, folded square of paper fluttered out. It was a bank deposit slip, but not from her usual bank. It was from a credit union in a neighboring town, dated just 2 months before she died. The slip showed a deposit of $18,000. The account number was handwritten on the back, along with a 4-digit code. My heart began to pound again. Was this another hidden asset, another secret? I drove to the credit union, the slip in my hand. I explained who I was, presented the death certificate and the letters testamentary from the estate administrator. The manager, a kind-eyed woman, looked up the account. "This is a payable on death account," she said softly. "It names a single beneficiary." She turned the screen toward me. The beneficiary name was Mark. It was Lisa. It wasn't me. It was my daughter, her full name written in my mother's elegant script. The manager printed the statement. The $18,000 was still there, untouched. It had never appeared in any will, any probate filing, any of the documents my siblings had scavenged. It was a secret within a secret, a final gift hidden from the vultures, placed directly into the future she knew they couldn't touch. Tears blurred my vision as I read the note my mother had left on file with the account, a note only the beneficiary or executor could see. It said, "For my granddaughter's dreams, for her freedom, never let them tell you I forgot." In that moment, I finally understood the full scope of her fight. She wasn't just building evidence against them. She was building an escape route for us. The ledger was the sword. This account, this last secret, was the shield. She had been outmaneuvering them from the very beginning, playing a desperate, lonely game to protect what little she could for the ones who still deserved it. I left the credit union and drove straight to my daughter's preschool. I watched her through the window, laughing on a swing, utterly innocent of the darkness her grandmother had held at bay. The money in that account wasn't just money. It was a message. It was proof that her love was strategic, enduring, and ultimately unbreakable. The war was over. The criminals were punished. The money was returned. But this small, secret victory was the one that finally let me breathe. It was the payoff she had engineered from the grave. Not just restitution, but redemption. I still have the brass key. It sits on my desk, not as a trophy of a battle won, but as a reminder. A reminder that the most important truths are often hidden in plain sight, documented by those the world has already written off. My mother's story is extreme, but it is not unique. Every year, countless families are torn apart by the quiet, legal violence of financial exploitation. The statistics are staggering, but they are just numbers. The reality is a ledger in a drawer, a whispered phone call to an old friend, a secret key taped under a chair. It's the chilling realization that the people you are supposed to trust most have been keeping a different set of books. What my mother understood, what her ledger proves, is that in the end, documentation is power. In a court of law, a memory is just a story. But a date, an amount, a recorded voice, a handwritten note about loneliness, these are bricks. She spent her final years building a wall of evidence, brick by painful brick, knowing she might not be there to see it finished, but trusting that someone would find the blueprint. The legal system calls this posthumous evidence. It is the testimony of the absent witness. And while it can be dismissed as the ramblings of an elderly mind, when it is systematic, when it is corroborated, it becomes an unshakable voice from beyond the grave. My siblings didn't just steal from a vulnerable woman. They stole from a meticulous bookkeeper who turned her own victimhood into a weapon. This story isn't really about revenge. It's about restoration. It's about the profound act of listening to someone who is no longer here to speak. That safety deposit box wasn't just a hiding place. It was a time capsule, a message in a bottle launched into the future, addressed to the one person she believed would understand the assignment. So what's the takeaway? Pay attention. Not just to the big dramas, but to the small silences, the sudden isolation, the unexplained financial changes. The tools of abuse are often legal documents, powers of attorney, joint accounts, forged signatures. The tools of justice are often just as simple: a notebook, a voice memo, a conversation with a friend. My daughter will never meet her grandmother, but she will know her, not through faded photos or family stories, but through the fierce, calculating love that secured her future when everything else was being stripped away. She will know that her grandmother was a fighter, an archivist of her own betrayal, and in the end, the author of her own justice. The key on my desk is a promise to remember that truth, no matter how ugly, always leaves a trail. You just have to be willing to look for it and brave enough to follow where it leads. If you found this story of hidden evidence and posthumous justice compelling, make sure to subscribe. We uncover more documentaries like this every week. Thanks for watching.